Hello everyone, this is now the second week of the course and we're going to move on to the context of the universal history that is narrated in Genesis, books 1 through 11. Now for those of you who are not familiar with Genesis located, that is in the Bible or in the Torah. So if you have a copy of it, that would be great and you can use that to refer. Other than that, I made sure in the Prezi you had access to the entire text. So you can look up the passages that I will be describing, and in addition you can always do a quick search online if you don't have a physical copy of it, so that you can become more acquainted with the text and be able to follow along better, and also initiate questions of your own as you go through the material. Now, one of the reasons why I do this section on Genesis 1 through 11, it is because this corresponds to a universal history. We will do Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and the three books are going to rely upon the content provided at the beginning of this of the Torah. And so becoming familiar with the basic themes of these religions is going to enable us to later be able to see how it works out in each one of those religions. So you have Genesis 1, 2, and 3, which is going to be a cluster. It's, if you want to conceive of it, it's more like a seed form of revelation. And then from there, all the necessary components of what will later follow in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is going to be contained in that seed form. So it's a very condensed cluster of information that will be put together there, and we'll seek to uncover it. The second reason is because it is the oldest record for the origin and development of civilization. So we'll take that into account. Besides Hinduism, we will have Hinduism contrasted with Genesis when we get to it on week 3. And in addition to the historicity of it, as well as the corresponding importance of it in regards to the religion, the three monotheistic religions, you're also going to have an example of what it looks like to engage examining a text and taking it at face value. Now remember, I mentioned that this course is not going to follow a secular bias where I would examine Hinduism, Judaism, and Christianity and these religions in light of secularism, and then assuming that they are all inventions of the human mind, then we can proceed to analyze them. I will give the perspective of the person that will be immersed in that tradition, and I will take the text at face value. So when we read the Quran, we will take the Quran as if it is a divinely inspired text, just like as the New Testament will do, or the Vedas will do. And we'll seek to understand it before we make an assessment regarding the truth or falsehoods contained therein. So as we continue on, there is a significant importance on the book of Genesis, and I will give you 7 points on that. And then I'll proceed in subsequent lectures to give you a sense of what should you have in mind before you approach the text. What kind of questions should occur to a thoughtful reader as they begin to engage with what this tradition has to provide. And so that will be a preliminary lecture, and then you will have one describing the 5 points of creation, and the purpose of creation, the purpose of mankind, the purpose of God intervening in history, the purpose of sin, and things of that nature are going to come up. And then you're going to go over a section on the fall, which is an explanation of why things went wrong, and what is the purpose of that, and in what way did things go wrong, sin and death, and what does that entail to human life, and how would a person that holds to the biblical worldview understand life. And then you have the section on redemption, which is chapter 3 of Genesis, where there is a means of salvation being provided. And then after that, you have the chapters 4 through 11, which is a subsequent historical development of everything that happened up to about 2600 BCE. So we're going to engage in this. I'm not quite sure yet how many lectures it will be in total, but I'll try to be as concise as I can with each one of them. Now, this week will require you to take notes on the lecture as well, and also to answer the questions that I will post. I'm still debating if I need to provide an outline, given that the information that will be needed is all contained in the Prezi. So I'll get back to you guys on that. So let's get into the material now and begin to understand this process. So as you look at the next click, you're going to see the book of Genesis, the biblical worldview. There is a little circle that is to the right of the title, and it delineates 7 different reasons why the book of Genesis, Genesis means origins, it has become provides the narrative account of 7 different aspects. And I also one of the helpful things about Prezi is that you can add text in more minute portions, and then it can be aggrandized as you look at it, zoom out or zoom in. So at this point, then you have in Genesis, you're going to have an account of the origin of the cosmos, how the universe began to exist. So remember, this a theistic perspective. Therefore, God is the only being, only Some is eternal. He is the only being that has always existed, and He will bring the universe into existence out of nothing. So you have a brief description of that in Genesis 1 and 2. Then you have what's called the origin of mankind, and that will be at the end of chapter 1 of the book of Genesis, where God speaks about making man in His own image. And that will be a very significant concept, as it has affected and continues to affect subsequent history. How do we view human beings? Where do they get their value? Is there such a thing as intrinsic value? Or can we speak of what's called utilitarian evaluation of human beings, which is a human being is only valuable insofar as he contributes to society. So we'll deal with that question, but it is said that mankind is created in the image of God, and we'll have to analyze what does that mean. In what senses can you be in the image of God when God doesn't have a body? So we can't look at someone like Zeus as somebody representing or embodying the qualities of human beings. So is this an example of anthropomorphism, as David Hume will speak? Or how else can we make sense of it? And then you have the origin of a covenant between God and men. So God places mankind in the garden, and they are given a blessing of obedience and a consequence for disobedience, and that is what's called a covenant, which is a mutual agreement between 2 parties. So in this case, God was going to hold to one side of the bargain if mankind was going to hold to its side of the bargain. And if both did, then positive consequences will follow. And if one broke the covenant, then that party will be delinquent and at fault. And then you have the introduction of sin. Now, sin is one of those words that is commonly used but very seldomly described. So we'll try to take time and understand what does it mean for human beings to be sinful? What does it mean to commit a sin? Are there different kinds of sins? And why is the consequence of sin so grievous? So we'll describe some of that and begin to understand what the connotation that the word sin has, as well as the immediate implications that are stated in the text. Then you have an introduction on point 5 of the origin of death. And we're going to distinguish between physical death, which is of course the natural death of your body, and then what's called spiritual death. And spiritual death is described as a state of the soul or a state of being. And it is a spiritual condition which is experienced in this life, and it goes on forever. And so we'll see what are the descriptions that are given for spiritual death, and how do we incur into that according to this narrative. Then you have the promise of redemption. How is mankind going to be redeemed? Or how is mankind going to be restored to a place of righteousness? Since the fall, then men have departed from the way of God, and they have been forsaken by God. Since they have sinned, God is holy. He cannot have fellowship with human beings who are unholy, and therefore now you have and see the need for redemption. So The three religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are going to advocate the need for redemption. Other religions will speak of it in different terms, like Hinduism will speak of deliverance from ordinary existence as moksha, or Buddhism will speak of it in light of nirvana. But this idea that there is something inherently wrong with the world, that we need to make sense of it, that somehow there's got to be an answer out there, it's something that permeates and that is throughout all the religions of the world. Is a way of overcoming the difficulties and the hindrances that we see day to day. And then last of all, you have a historical event narrated, and that is going to be the beginning of the nation of Israel. And that will carry on into the book of Exodus, but that's also a historical significant event as we continue to venture into this. So up to this point, if you've been listening attentively, we have 7 points that speak about how the book of Genesis is the book of origins, and how this book of origins is going to provide the content that we are going to later see unfolded in the religions, the subsequent religions that we're going to study. First Judaism, then Christianity, and then Islam. And keeping this in mind, the content that will be provided in this section will help you enormously in making sense of subsequent chapters. So if it is almost paramount, if you don't understand Genesis 1, 2, and 3, then you will not understand subsequent books. Remember, it is like reading any other book. You begin at the beginning, and you follow the plot and the main ideas. And if you missed the initial development of the story, then how are you going to fill in the gaps later on without you actually knowing what's going on? So at this point, then I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to develop a lecture on the preliminary questions that should be asked as we continue on with the book of Genesis. Thank you.